Good morning, everyone. It's 2 p.m. and we have a new genre on this channel. We have an interview with Anastasia Kuznetsova.
Yeah, I guess we're going to talk about data science because I'm a data scientist and that's why he invited me here. Yeah, I don't know. What questions do you have?
First of all, what is data scientist? What does it do?
There are many different kinds of data scientists. I am more of a decision scientist or product data scientist where I work with, well, products that companies have. Like imagine if it's an application that a company that you work for has, then as a data scientist, I would be responsible for defining what kind of metrics we want to track about the application performance. Maybe we want to know how many users visit the application. Maybe we want to know what are the interactions of the users with various parts of the application, various features that there are. So I will kind of help defining the metrics we will use to understand the performance of the product and also help you developers to build the tracking for those metrics in the most scalable, comprehensive and useful way. And as a top layer of this work, I'm gonna do the analysis based on metrics. So pretty much provide decision-making support for various stakeholders like product managers, product owners, on making decisions whether they want to introduce a new feature, whether they have any problems with user retention. It's quite a broad field, so maybe we should narrow it down somehow to talk about specifics.
What I know about analysis is, for example, A/B testing. Is it something in your direction?
Yeah, A/B testing is a part of, well, a lot of data scientists' job, depending on what kind of company they work in. Mostly it's B2C companies, so where you have actual real users that use your product, application, website, whatnot. It's quite commonly done in big tech companies. It's quite advanced. There are different techniques on how to do A/B testing. There are different considerations that you need to take into account.
How I imagine A/B testing is that, for example, you need to make a decision. Should we put this CTA call to action button on the top of the page or in the bottom? Sounds silly, but whatever. We don't know what will work better. If we present some more information to the user and then they will make a more educated choice, or in the beginning where they're more willing to do it right now. Whatever.
Yeah, that's actually a really good example.
So we want to decide which page will work better. So we split test it, we deploy both versions, and then we capture the data from them, and then we perform the analysis, right?
Yeah.
This is quite narrow.
Yeah.
What tools are you using to do this? Is it just Google Analytics and that's it?
I think
what is it?
There are still quite a few companies that use out-of-the-box tools like Google Analytics. It really depends on the tech stack of the company you work for. Now it's quite common to use Google Cloud Platform. I think most of the companies that I know use that to both store the data, analyze the data using BigQuery, and also maybe do some real-time data processing if they have the ingestion part as well in the Google Cloud Platform. So let's say your application that has this buttons, this CTA call to action buttons that you need to test, has some system where you create the tracking, and then you can create a way to connect it to BigQuery so that you real-time receive the data about the tracking. So the click, for example, of the user on this button. Why
would you need it real-time?
Very often, depending on the size of your product, you want to do real-time monitoring, because if it's, I don't know, if it's a Facebook, let's say, and if they have some drastic change to their interface, it would cost them a lot of users and a lot of money, or it could cause a lot of problems if you don't do real-time monitoring, because even an hour of wrong decision, let's say, could, impact them a lot.
And as I imagine, the A/B testing probably is the most basic, where you have a binary choice, this or that, and probably you do also this sort of multi-dimensional decisions, right?
Multivariate testing. A/B testing can have as many cases as you want, case as in control case where you have no experience or old experience, and as many other cases that you want to test. That depends on your user base, so you have to calculate the statistical significance beforehand. You need to calculate how many users you should show this new feature to and for how long, to be able to know with certainty that the result is actually different.
With all that, then am I thinking too narrow that all this testing is the only thing you do? What do you do beyond this, the multivariate testing?
Yeah, a lot of things. It depends what company needs. it also depends what stage the company is at. So a lot of like startups actually need a data scientist that has a very broad set of skills. So they need to know how to work with data warehousing. They need to know how to build data models, fact models, where like they store the actual information. They need to be able to help developers in much more detail to build tracking for all those features that we need to know to be able to actually test something in the future. Yeah, so there is like a good source that shows a very good idea on what kind of different data roles are needed in a company based on the maturity of the company. And at the bottom, there is, of course, data processing and storage of the data. Then there is data cleaning and all those kind of like daily jobs where you create out of all these events, like clicks that you have in the app, that you create like actual metrics and calculations. Then there is more like explorative analytics where you do analysis that actually is useful for decision making when you like calculate certain metrics, see the performance of your products. Then there is A/B testing where you, or like for example, rollout testing when you want to see how different features perform compared to the original. And then the top is the kind of least common but most hyped one is AI and machine learning. Not a lot of companies actually need that or are in the stage where they could use machine learning effectively, but this is like the most common thing that everyone thinks about.
But is it like the automation of the decisions, the AI? So we basically go from if you go from the ground up first, you work with, as you said, storing and processing data, right? And I was like, what does it mean? Is it like Logstash? Is it that? Or Kafka, where you store the events that happen and you just store them at first? Is it what you do?
Sort of. I think Kafka is more for SLIs. So for service level indicators. So when you need to actually know that your product is not down and fix that really fast. When it comes to analytics, it's more beneficial to store data in a different way. So SLIs usually are stored as like a counter. You increase a counter of a certain metric, like how many minutes it was on, like, yeah, stuff like this.
So this is our ground level. We just store the clicks, store the events of page
views,
visits,
user interactions, as deep as you want to go, like with certain, I don't know, specific parts of your product.
And what is usually used for this storing of this information?
So that's what I mentioned. For example, Google Cloud Service, AWS, so Amazon Web Services. You can have in-house built system on like Hive or Hadoop. You can, like, there are many solutions. I can't really name all of them. I mostly work with Google Cloud storage.
So people mostly use the services now instead of in-house solutions.
Yeah, they're very scalable. They're so much faster. BigQuery is pretty good in terms of like writing and executing queries, so you wouldn't have to wait hours until you manage to get some result from a query that you wrote.
And what is next level? So you've stored all this information, all those clicks, page visits and such?
Yeah, infrastructure cleaning.
Like housekeeping. You need to remove all the crap that is irrelevant for you.
So for example, if I work with a certain engineer that works on a new feature that they want to introduce in the product, I would discuss with them what kind of tracking we want to add to this feature. So maybe it's new user interaction, maybe it's, I don't know, user clicking on this specific button. So then the engineer would have to implement the event that we call, that would be stored in the future in like Google Cloud Platform, where you would see at what timestamp, what kind of user, what is the user ID, what is the product, what is the button, like all these identifiers. And then when we release this for general user base to be available to like interact with, as a data scientist, usually I would go in and see whether there's any anomalies, whether some fields are missing. So we will check if something is off with the tracking, if there is something off with the tracking, or if there are some kind of, let's say, cheaters or bots that abuse our system that we see that kind of skews the metrics that we can have. We will try to remove that. We will try to clean out any missing metrics, any testing applications, for example. We want to only track production.
So basically what you would look at the diagram and you would see a huge dip that looks off. or you would see a spike and you're like, okay, something is going on here, and either it's a naturally happening anomaly, or like something is messing around with it, like hackers or script junkies or whatever, or something is not working, or maybe it's okay. And this is where you start to clean up the data.
Yeah, pretty much this is like all the possible outcomes of this situations of like an outlier, where you start digging whether there was a change in the app, whether someone deployed something, whether it's just as normal thing. It could be seasonality, it could be actually users doing something. So
Google ReCAPTCHA stopped working, now we don't have authentications. That happens?
That could happen, yeah.
Yeah. And what is next layer? Okay, you've found out what are the outliers, well, like what is happening, and what's next?
So the very important fundamental layer is to build kind of core metrics that identify product performance. So everything that, like, let's say your product managers and senior leadership needs to know to be able to say we're doing well and like determine the direction where to go. So that's where we're gonna work from top down with the leadership deciding what kind of metrics they need, whether it's monthly active users, daily active users, what makes most sense for the product that we're working with. Then we will go more into detail with engineers, whether they need more specific metrics about like certain performance or certain clicks, or how like this API works. We will combine all those metrics and decide how we want to calculate them and make a uniform way to like always calculate these metrics this way, and create like data sets where those metrics will be stored.
So you work like in between of those two sides, the management, the like higher management that decides on the overall strategy of the product, and the engineers. How do you look at the product then? How deep do you look into the system? Do you see it as a sort of a black box that needs to perform somehow, or you actually need to know the architecture?
That depends as well. On the size of the company. Like there are usually, if the company is big enough, there are data scientists or data analysts that work only with leadership. There are data scientists and analysts that work only with the engineers. I think personally, to be a good data scientist, you really need to know the product you're working with, both from a technical perspective, but also from a user perspective. Like how would users interact? How, like, kind of user experience research that even though it's qualitative research, you still kind of need to be aware of, as well as knowing all the parts of the system where things are happening, because that's how we help you to define where to build the tracking and in what way. And also this helps us to do better investigations in the future of whether something's wrong or not.
You mentioned, oh shit, I've lost my thought. You mentioned that, and like this is if you want to become a good
data scientist.
So how do you become a data scientist?
How to become a data scientist? I'm sure now there are actually programs where you study data science. When I was studying 5-6 years ago, there was not so many programs that were specifically focused on data science. So most of the people that I work with now are coming more from software engineering, computer science, mathematics, statistics, and physics degrees. Most of the people actually tend to have a degree. I think now it's becoming less common. Now there are more like Coursera specializations that you can have.
So it's not a hard requirement that you have a computer science degree?
It's mostly a requirement because it's a lot of like investigative research work. It's also often a requirement to have a PhD, especially in the companies that are like bigger and more focused on machine learning. I wouldn't say it's a hard requirement. You definitely can find a company that will hire a data scientist, or you can without a degree, or you can change your direction within your company and try to do data science after, I don't know, being a software developer as well.
I've got an impression that it's only big companies that usually need data scientists and data analysts, but you said that startups also have them, right? So, like, what is the question?
Yeah, what is the question, Maxim?
I have an observation, like, companies sometimes need data scientists. What do you think about that?
I think most of the companies that work in digital and tech sphere should have a data scientist or data analyst. When they're just starting off, it's very common to have a need in like a very full stack data scientist, as we call it. So that's someone who can build tools, build pipelines, who knows data warehousing, who also knows analytics and maybe even machine learning. So like a very unicorn kind of person that's really hard to find. When you're moving more towards bigger companies, they usually have a much more segmented look at the data science role. So
like
there's
narrow.
Yeah, it's very narrow. There are data warehousing engineers, BI engineers, like business intelligence engineers. There are machine learning engineers. There are machine learning researchers. There are product data scientists. There are maybe some data scientists that work with SLIs, so service level indicators. Like that's so much more specialized. So it just depends with what stage your company is at. But I think if you're working in any way with any kind of data that you receive from anywhere, it's really beneficial to have someone who knows how to work with data from kind of the beginning, so that you start off with the right direction.
About starting off, what if I decide to stop with front-end development and like web development in general, or like is data science, if you work on web application, it's still whatever, and decide to switch to data science. If I want to do it right now, like today, to switch to data science, where should I go? What should I learn? And what should I study?
Do you want to do it in your current company or somewhere, anywhere?
So probably I will have more chances in my current company because of social connections, right?
Yeah, I think it might be easier for you to start off like exploring the ways you can introduce analytics into your work at your current job, and your data scientists that you have in your company will actually appreciate it so much, because it's really helpful for us when there are people who are genuinely interested in analytics and want to learn more. So you can start off with having a project where you're working with a data scientist on maybe an A/B test, or maybe some kind of tracking mechanism, some kind of analytics engine, whatever. That will give you an idea of how they work, especially if applicable to your current role, current company, the product that you're working on. You will also not have to learn a lot about the product because you already have an idea about it. You can understand what tools they're using, what is the tech stack in your company, and see whether that's something you want to learn. I think that's generally a good step for you to... I'm quite sure that was possible to hear.
It's fine. We will just cut it out.
Yeah, I think it's a good step to just try to see whether it's something that you would be interested in. If you want to go further, I would recommend checking out a few data science specializations on Coursera. Also, mostly for you to understand what does the work entail, rather than having something that will make you hireable as a data scientist in the future. I unfortunately cannot say whether it's enough to have a course to be hired anywhere as a data scientist.
Probably not.
Yeah. It depends. Maybe somewhere, yes. Maybe if you move within your company to a more data-related role and work there for some time, then it will be easier to become a data scientist or some kind of person that works with data somewhere else.
Another problem that I foresee with this, let's imagine that, well, I don't have any data scientists at work where I currently work. Then there is no chance. Like, for example, if you're a front-end developer, it's quite easy. You just do some projects, like pet projects, and then you present them on an interview and you say, I did this, this, and that, and maybe I participated in some open source project. How can you do this with data science?
I'm sure you actually already do that as a developer. There are definitely tools that you build to see the performance of the product that you're working on. Maybe it's like real-time monitoring of the, I don't know, number of API calls you have, or whether it's down or not.
But isn't it too basic?
But it is a first step. You can go ahead and make it more complicated. Maybe you want to, for example, build an anomaly detection engine, which is actually something you can use machine learning for, and that could be useful for your company when you're like, for example, have, I don't know, a Slack channel that's powered by this anomaly detection engine, and that sends you a message whether there's something out.
It still makes me think that the most viable solution is either you already have some data scientists at work and then just try to be friends with them and make them teach you how to do this data science woo-woo and become one of them, or find a job where they have some data scientists if you want to transition to be a data scientist. Is it really the two viable ways?
No, I think it's a kind of a mindset shift. Like, you're a YouTuber, you have the channel, you have analytics in your YouTube channel.
Yeah, right.
You look at them, you make decisions based on the views or the patterns.
I made only one decision, just make the video every day. That's it. One decision.
See, you already have data-driven decision making.
Yeah.
So
cool.
it is right now. If you are working in digital or have anything to do with anything digital, you can use analytics at your work, and it's sort of up to you and your drive to decide whether you want something more from that. Like, if you have this information, you may, I don't know, use YouTube API to scrape it and build your own tool that's better and more representative and more like tailored towards your needs. That would be data analytics.
You guys are already data scientists. You just don't know it yet, and like just very low level, like newbies.
Or everyone is working with data now. Like, every single person produces the data, and if you start thinking about it this way, like everything you do in every app is sort of tracked somewhere in some way, and you can maybe benefit from that yourself. Like, for example, with banking, you can use open banking APIs to get your own data about various purchases you did in various banks you have, and then build a model to see whether you're going the right direction. Maybe you're spending too much on certain category or not. This is just working with data. Everyone can do that, whether they are working with something that has data or not. If you have a smartphone, pretty much you can work with data.
That's quite empowering. So everyone is already a data scientist.
Well, not yet, but everyone can start being a data scientist.
Is it more lucrative than front-end developers? Do you know any statistics about salaries? Is it bigger than...
I don't know your salaries.
I won't tell.
I know my salary.
Okay. Let's...
it's hard to say.
How are we gonna judge it then? But from what you saw on the market, maybe, I don't know.
I don't look for front-end developer salaries.
Maybe, look, you could be looking for data analyst, and then someone just sends you a link like, you are a perfect fit for this front-end developer. This happens to me, for example. I'm JavaScript and Python developer, and I often get emails about like Java developer or C++ developer positions. So I know what do they earn. So maybe that happened to you.
No, not for the front-end developers. I usually only get like data science, data analyst, maybe data warehouse engineer. I would say, based on the hype that we had recently for the past maybe 5 years around data science, data scientists, especially if you have a PhD and you are more like research oriented and work in a big company, tend to get paid a lot.
That's enough for me to know. Thank you.
But you do need to have a PhD then.
It's hard to get. So like these dreams about, I will go to Coursera and then I will try to find some data analyst and like teach me your wisdom. That's not really gonna work unless I get a PhD.
But you mentioned that you work in Python, so that's like half job done.
Another half is PhD.
Another half is SQL.
No, but I worked with SQL as well.
Then you were a data scientist.
But PhD. No, without PhD. So I will be like the lowest grade and everyone will be like, you are the lowest grade non-PhD data analyst.
Of course, nobody's going to do that. It's just that the roles that you might be working with will be less research-oriented, which is normal because you haven't done research since you didn't have like a PhD.
The research background, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, the research background. So you would have maybe more data science developer roles or machine learning engineer role where some researcher creates a model and your role is to kind of fit it in production, so actually use your software development skills more, but still need to be able to understand the kind of the data science part behind it.
It's cool. That's empowering. Nothing is impossible, even without the PhD. Thank you so much.
That's true.
Actually, Anastasia also has a YouTube channel where she talks about data analyst, data analysis.
Yeah, I'm talking about data science and career progression as a data scientist. I also share some productivity tips on how to progress better. And yeah, you can check it out if you're interested in data science.
The link will be in the description. Subscribe to her channel and see you next time.
Thank you.